The following video is part of the Northern California Training Academy and Casey Family Program's Crisis Communication and Preparation video series. This series is designed to walk child welfare leaders through steps to take in order to be prepared before an incident occurs, including the development of a crisis communication plan, working within a political environment, and creating a narrative that promotes successful solutions that will improve the safety and well-being of children and families in care.
So, Marty, I'd like for you to kind of wear both hats and tell everybody a little bit about the work you've done over the years, both as a reporter, but also kind of how you see, from Casey's perspective especially, the recovery process, if you will.
Sure. So I was a newspaper reporter for well over a decade. I worked on the East Coast, and then I worked in Seattle at the Seattle Times, which is the major newspaper there. And one thing as I was thinking about this, I want to make the point that reporters remember, and every good reporter has what they call their tickle list. And they will, so if you say something to them like, hey, in 6 months we're going to have X, Y, or Z done, any good reporter is going to go back and put on their little tickle list, check back in 6 months that this is done. Now for you, you might not remember you made that promise, and you might go back and the furs subsided and you move on, and then you're going to get that call. And here was one of my favorite stories when I covered City Hall in Seattle, and the mayor, newly elected, had said, one of his key priorities, because he was a great communicator, everything fell under one of his 4 priorities, and one was getting Seattle moving. And so he said he made a big deal because we have a particular bridge that connects West Seattle to downtown. And every time someone's car would break down, it would obviously be in rush hour. And so he said, we're going to fix this. We're going to station tow trucks on either side of the bridge, and they're going to wait there, and they're going to immediately tow these cars, and it's going to be a fantastic fix. And so he had a big press conference, and everyone was great, and they cut the ribbon. And so I wrote down on my little tickle list, check back in 6 months to see how effective this program is. And lo and behold, 6 months later, I FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, as you all know, how many times those tow trucks had actually been used. And in 6 months, they had towed a total of 3 cars off the bridge. And we had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to have these trucks. So that was just one point, is like you can never make a promise that you're going to do something without really thinking about what the consequences are and thinking later on that someone's going to ask that question, so remember that. Another thing to think about, and this is fine, I'm going to correct things a little bit, and this is kind of builds on what other folks have said. I don't think a newspaper reporter has ever been told, you need to write a story so we can sell newspapers. But what they do, what motivates them, and what motivated in Denver, what motivated the paper there, is winning an award. That is the key thing that motivates every journalistic organization that does an investigative piece. They don't necessarily care about selling papers, but they do care about getting that award. And here's one of the things that they have to do in order to get an award. They have to show that that coverage they did made a change. That is one of the key components of it. And so what you're seeing, I think, in Colorado is they love that follow-up story that says, hey, here's what happened, and we'll take credit for the fact that our story caused that to happen. Now, that's something you can use to your advantage, and I think you guys have done a great job of using that to your advantage. So that's a really good tip to remember, that when they do that investigative story, they're going to look for positive change in the wake of it. And if you can leverage that to your advantage, all the better. And I think the third thing that I would say, and I'll add that the mayor that I did that really awful story on eventually hired me 2 years later as his press secretary, which I spent 4 years working in his office for. But one thing that we always found really effective is that if you set the criteria upon which you want to be measured in the wake of a crisis, that frames the follow-up coverage. And so that gives you a lot of power. So if you create your own scorecard of like, we want to be judged on these 3 criteria, that gives you an opportunity to really frame that entire conversation that happens after the crisis. And it puts you in a position of being able to set the goals that you want to achieve for your objectives and not allowing others to set those for you. That's a very powerful thing to do if you can consider that. And then, of course, what everyone has been talking about here is do that follow-up. Work with those groups and make sure that they know the steps that you've taken, the progress you've made, in the wake of that, and that can really change the conversation. And I think those are really key. And the reason, just to answer your other big question about why Casey cares so much about this, is because really, from the big picture, how often the media drives change in the child welfare system, when what we want is leadership within the child welfare system to drive that change. And so that's why we care about this, because we recognize the dynamic has far been skewed toward having outside forces drive that change, rather than having the folks who really understand the issue and the leaders who really can set that vision forward to really take us to where we want to go. And so that's why this particular panel discussion is really what the essence of what this conference is about, is how do we move beyond this? How do we take control over what we have? Because we can't ask reporters to be nice to us, because they never will be nice to us. That's not the nature of what the media is, and nor would we really, if we step back, ask the media to do that. They see themselves as watchdogs. Their job is to check power, and government power is one of the ones that they really think about mostly. So don't ask that tiger to change its stripes, but do take the opportunity that, to take what's in your power to make a difference. And you can set that agenda, and there are tools and there are techniques and there are strategies that can help you do that. And it'll never be perfect. As one of my mentors said, communications is not communications is a batting average. You're never going to bat 1,000, right? I mean, so if you're doing 50, batting 500, you're doing fantastic. So remember that. It's never going to be easy. It's never going to be 100%. But it does matter, especially cumulative over time.
What I'd like to do in no more than 10 seconds is ask the panel if there is one tip you could give this group that hasn't really already been mentioned, that would be an important thing for them to do in recovery or continuing. And I'm going to start. I think it is really important to become a student of coverage of a crisis and see how it unfolds and how it handles, whether it's airplane crashes, whether it's safety issues, whether God knows how the president is going to get out of this issue of, if you like your plan, you don't have to change it, but they're going to have to do some massive management of that one. Just become a student of it, watch it, follow it, think about how it can apply to your agency. Kim, your tip.
So in addition to all of the technical, the planning, the skill building, I'm going to build on what the woman in the back said is, don't forget, and I think you talked about it earlier today, I wasn't here this morning, don't forget and always remember to take care of your PIO and to take care of yourself. We are experts in treating and addressing the trauma of the kids and family in care or at risk of entering care. We have to remember about the secondary trauma that your workforce, your PIO, and child welfare directors have to take care of themselves as well.
Great,
That's
thank you.
part.
I would say step back, take a breath. I really look at what's going on from the outside looking in, because it's, as Reggie said this morning, you get so embroiled in it, and it's sometimes good to do that. As one of our previous speakers also said, debrief often, because it's very therapeutic, and take your PIO to the spa.
Patty Jo, 30 seconds.
This is a good opportunity to utilize your Directors Association and even develop it further. We, in Ohio, we also have a public information officers group of all the counties that have PIOs get together and process this as a group. If you have a high-functioning Directors Association, that becomes your best advocacy group in times of crisis when you need this third-party comment.
Great. Marty, the last word.
I'm going to attempt to do a good segue. I would say this, clearly define your own narrative. Be strong in that. Understand what you want to say, because the only way you're ever going to define or change the narrative to what you want it to be is if you know what you want it to be. So start there. Be clear about it.